Wise Archive is a Norwich-based oral history group made up of volunteers. Following the closure of Wensum Lodge, Wise Archive applied to the Heritage Fund for a grant to celebrate Wensum Lodge's many achievements and its importance to Norwich, Norfolk and beyond. Its numerous and ever-evolving leisure and cultural courses provided opportunities to learn new knowledge and skills, and enabled many students to move on to new careers. Funding was always tight, but the inspirational combination of Warden Ken Davis, ably assisted by Warden Brenda Davis, and the Friends of Wensum Lodge, ensured that Wensum Lodge was able to thrive for many years. However, beginning in the early 1990s, changes in government and local adult education policy meant more funding cuts, and Wensum Lodge went into a slow decline. Closure followed at the end of 2023, not long after the COVID pandemic. Wise Archive is interested in how things were done and how things have changed.
My wife Brenda and I came here in 1965. Wensum Lodge had been an empty brewery site for several years, which the Norfolk Education Committee, under their Chief Education Officer, Dr. later Sir Lincoln Ralphs, had bought for £30,000, intending to make it a teachers' centre which would be the envy of Europe. It started first as hostel accommodation for Norfolk's further education students, who needed to board in Norwich to continue their education. He wanted us to develop Wensum Lodge so that youth service weekend courses, which we had held in classrooms with camp beds in various schools all over the county, could be held here. He also wanted Wensum Lodge to develop with a strong community emphasis. The place has a lot of character. The music house and the maltings block were converted in the year before our arrival to make mainly residential accommodation, although we had a meeting room in both houses. These buildings and the historic cellars under the music house were to become the basis of the future growth. In 1968, the Preschool Playgroup Association asked for a room on 1 day a week for their training course, spread over a whole year. In 1969 and 1970, we had the Cambridge University Extramural Board asking if they too could use a room in the daytime for classes. Then, the Norfolk Women's Institutes, who were growing out of their headquarters, particularly with painting classes, asked for space. And we gradually began to develop a shared program of daytime local education authority and Cambridge classes. In addition, we had quite a regular program of weekend activities for various bodies, including the Army Cadet Force and the St. John's Ambulance. Outside term time, we were providing accommodation for groups of people visiting Norwich, particularly the choirs deputising for Norwich Cathedral Choir during the months of July and August. By 1968 we had also opened the sports hall. Although it is by some way the largest building on the site, it would have been the smallest in a huge development plan which never came off, and included a number of 12-storey tower blocks.
You had about 15 branches all over Norfolk, based in schools largely, and they were the centres of adult education at night. And of course, Wensum Lodge was the hub. That was where it all was managed from. Well, it's got a pottery set up. It had artistic studios, lecture halls, people who needed help to get into the employment, basic skills like numeracy, literacy, and people who wanted to get access to university training. And I think there was a whole programme came in for helping mothers. So you had a whole raft of women that helped other women to get into the nursery system, and WEA, Workers' Education Association. And what I discovered was that there was these magnificent 10-week courses studying Renaissance Italy or Anglo-Saxon, everything under the sun.
I was particularly interested in sculpture. I went to a sculpture course. It has all the equipment, a lovely cellar to store the clay, And the sculpture in particular is going to be really hard to replicate. There are not many places in Norfolk that have kilns. Wensum Lodge was all about people congregating and meeting, a safe place to go. It's about social contact, and all the debate is about mental health. That is the best investment you could make in mental health, is bringing people together to learn and create.
The Chinese Association in Norwich established a Chinese class in Wensum Lodge. A lot of the children in the county would never really have a chance to mingle or meet with each other. There was a strong community feel, and we certainly learnt a lot more about our own cultures.
I started going to the jewellery and silversmithing classes. It wasn't very long before I sort of really fell in love with working with metal and jewellery making. And because it's quite a scary thing to start doing. There's a lot of kind of big flames for soldering and very fast moving wheels for polishing. And I found the Monday morning classes were quite good fun as well. There was a real regular group. They were very supportive as I was kind of getting into it as a young person.
I had to do a pre-degree course. We'd go to Wensum Lodge about once a month. So you would turn up about 7 o'clock, the tutorial would go on for a couple of hours until 9, and then very, very frequently we would go downstairs to Jernet's to the bar. And there we would continue the discussions that we'd had in the tutorials, which were absolutely brilliant because it gave you a much wider view of all the things that you were learning about.
When our first young students came, some liked to explore, and they opened this door and they found this dark, interesting space. It was full of barrels, it had lots of cobwebs, and they thought, what a super place for a party. We set to and emptied it and thought, we have got quite an interesting space here. We had to get electricity put in, and we found that the church over the road was being cleared out. And of course they didn't want their pews. There was a pub closing, and Ken managed to source a bar. Our caretaker at the time, he made most of the tables, and it became a very happy and gregarious sort of place.
Then I discovered Jernet's Bar, and Richard Fryer did many of those musical gigs that were set up there, sort of folk night, and there'd be, Spanish music on another night. Jernet's Bar was used for clubs, and it was totally open to the public. It was a functioning bar. I do remember one weekend where we had a folk weekend, but all the sessions were held in that crypt. Because it's got nooks and crannies, you could actually have 2 sessions going on at once.
I used to go to Jernet's Bar, and on a Friday evening they would have some music events there which were quite popular, and some of my neighbours would like going there. We used to go about once a month. I think there was like a poetry group and like all storytelling, and it was just nice to have something to do in that area that didn't cost too much and was quite community focused. I also was involved in a community group, King Street Neighbours, that originally started in that building, meeting there once a month. And the idea of that was that the residents would discuss some of the developments, some of the issues there, and just try and kind of help foster a sense of community, have a few community events each year. The sort of monthly meetings we were allowed to have in Jernet's Bar, and we'd be able to dry drinks and snacks there at fairly low cost, which was good.
It was building with a lot of facilities, a lot of potential, shall we say. And it had been really well used in its earlier days. It was linked to the adult education part of Wensum Lodge. It took us 2 years just to get them to the point of saying, yes, you can do something with it. We couldn't afford to pay anybody. They had in their bank account, when they closed Wensum Lodge, £5,000. So they granted that to us as Wensum Sports Centre. We literally had no money. We were very lucky also that the council had granted us use of the car park. It was a big car park, 50 or 60 spaces. We knew if we could charge a nominal rate, that would be an income. So that with the grant from Friends and Wensum Lodge, we could actually function. We shouldn't lose this building. So it took us 2 years literally to open.
I went onto the committee, as I said, because you could just see there were less and less people, less and less courses being run. And I could see the economics of it and think, well, if the county council are not running it properly, it's an old building, it's going to go to rack and ruin. It was being run down. I think it was about 2013. The manager was showing the new portfolio holder round, and he suddenly said, we're going to get rid of this anyway, we're going to sell it off. And then there'd been a change of county council and they just shelved it. Then COVID hit. The staff were furloughed and then we've all got back. But it felt so quiet on the site. It was the last class before the summer break and they're going to close it.
I remember the day I was at Wensum Lodge, the day they said, there is COVID, we have to go home and stop working there. And I just remember a poetry teacher, I think she was, crying at the entrance. And she said, even if one day we come back here, everything will be changed, people will be changed and nothing will be the same anymore. And it's very sad to leave. It's the last person I talked to in Wensum Lodge, and it's true that everything changed afterwards. And so that's the last memory I have from the place.